we never speak to one audience. Whenever we get out there on stage, it's not just one audience we have to deal with. I'm sure we try to keep it simple. We think of it as one audience, but it's not. There's all different sorts of audiences out there. And as speakers, our job is to try to make all of them happy. Ed Tate talks about 5 different types of audiences, which I'm going to call the 5 F's. These 5 different types of audiences are things that we need to think about when we go out there. Because when we get out in front of any type of a crowd, there's a good chance all 5 are going to be out there. And we're going to need to take care of all 5 with our one speech. It's a challenge, but that's our job as speakers. Making the whole audience happy, the entire audience, all the audiences out there. Making them all happy. Not just one audience, not just 2 audiences, all the audiences. And the first F Ed Tate talks about is the Funster. You know the Funster? The Funster is the person who just wants to have a good time. That's all they're about. That's all they're interested in. As long as you're entertaining, you're fun, things go along, they're perfectly happy. The moment you get dull, boring, repetitious, they're gone. So, with the Funster, you got to keep it lively. You got to keep it fun. They say, don't tell jokes. And that's a good idea. Don't tell jokes when you're out there giving a speech. But still, you have to have a sense of humor. You have to have a sense of what things are funny, what things aren't. Or if it isn't humor, at least keep it interesting. Keep it moving along. Maybe you've got a great story. Maybe you've got some sort of interesting story that'll pull the Funster right in, keep them having a good time, keep them surprised, keep them on their toes. Because if you lose the Funster, they're gone. And the problem when you lose one person in the audience, or one audience, pretty soon the other audiences start drifting off too. So you want to keep all the audiences busy. With a Funster, it's all about keeping it moving, keeping it popping, doing something that wakes them up. Funster might like things that startle and surprise. So maybe, for the middle of your speech, you suddenly go like that. Loud sound, wakes them up. Hey! Something like that might work. Something startling, something different. Maybe tell a story that has an where they aren't quite sure what's going to happen next. And as they keep listening and listening, they find out more about the situation. Talk about a person who's stranded in an airport, doesn't know where they're going to go. They've been stuck there for an hour. And as they're standing there at the airport, suddenly they're struck with an idea. A thought comes into their head they've never had before. And they think, wow, I get it. I really get it. And then you go on with the rest of your speech. You just drop it right there. And you keep kind of the Funster hooked. There's a story. It's not quite worked out yet. Something's going to happen later. Something interesting. At the end, they're going to find out something about that story. Something that really they get. Really makes things come alive. Makes things get interesting. But they'll have to wait all the way through your speech till you get to the end. And when you do get to the end, make sure you tie that point in back into the story. Ed Tate reminds us that you need to make sure it ties back into the story. So world champion speaker Ed Tate says, watch out for the Funster out there. So you get to the end of the story, maybe the point is all about the importance of being prepared. And suddenly the person realized that they were on the wrong plane. Keep the Funster occupied, Keep the Funster busy, and you'll have at least one audience happy. There are going to be a certain number of feelers in your audience. These are people who feel things. Feel your pain. Feel how bad things are. I get it. I understand. I'm here for you. Those sort of people. And they're going to expect to feel your pain. They're going to expect to carry about your speech. Feelers want to feel something. They want something from the heart. So if you talk about things and it's all dry and logic and rational, there's nothing really deep down, feelers out there are going to be disappointed. And you're going to lose one audience right there. Nothing going up there. Same usual stuff I've heard before. Nothing new. I don't care. They don't care. Forget it. You can't just talk the dry facts to the feelers out there. You have to somehow get into the story, get into what's going on, explain what's going on. One thing that can work very well with the feelers, if you just confess something that went not quite right. It's so tempting when we get out on stage, you just think of ourselves as the perfect one. We're absolutely perfect up here, we know everything, and we just tell everybody out there how to do things. Remember, if you want to make that connection with the feelers, you've got to see as a little bit vulnerable. Someone who made mistakes, but now knows better. So never be afraid to talk about some of the issues you had. And you can start out with something like, I know what you're thinking. You're angry, you're upset, you're mad. You've been down this road before, it's never worked. You're frustrated. I felt the same way. I felt that it was a bad time, that things wouldn't get any better. There's no way up. But now I've found things a little bit different. I went through a long time, difficult issues, difficult problems. In fact, I even lost people in my family. Family members didn't want to speak to me because I was so negative. It's all I could see. Every day, another shade of gray. And so on. Get into the story. Talk about all the things that are going on and really play up the emotional things going on there. If there aren't any emotional things, put some in there. For the feelers out there, the feel, felt, found works very, very well. That's a system that, when you talk about how you feel, understand how the audience feels. So you get into the feelings right at the beginning. And then you say, hey, I felt the same way. I get it. I connect with you. And it's really important when you're speaking with feelers that you connect emotionally. And describe it more and more. How they feel, what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and how you felt the same way. And then you move on to that transformation part. But now I've found that things are different. Now that I've been able to get past the anger, life's better, happier, more joyful. I've found better existence. It's brought people back into my life. I'm happier, more upbeat. Feelings. So get the feelings and put them into the speech and make sure you're there, because you're going to have feelers out there. You're definitely going to have people who say, tell me a story and make me care, or I'm not going to listen. So for all the feelers out there, for that audience of feelers you've got, make sure, connect with them. Make sure afterwards you manage to feel the pain. Some people are going to be followers. You're going to have an audience of followers out there. And the thing about followers is they're looking for someone to follow. And they're always thinking, could it be you? Are you the one I want to follow? Why would I want to follow you? What are the things you're telling me that I can apply and do in my life? How will following you help me develop and grow in my life? Pretty much every speech you give, you're going to have an audience of followers out there. Now, the thing about it is that's great, because you do want people to follow you. People follow you and they start going along and they say, wow, this is really useful stuff, great, fantastic, I can apply it in my life, I can see where I can go, I can develop from there, I want to hear more. Those are the people you want in your audience. Those are the followers that you want to have. The thing about the follower is they've got to have something to follow. So if you're kind of all out there and kind of confused and not quite sure and saying, well, you could do it this way, and people do this step sometimes, but sometimes they skip that step and go on to the next step, and actually you can omit that step entirely. It's not that important. Unless, of course, you really want to do it. Forget it. They've got nothing to follow. They're certainly not going to follow you. You have to be clear. Very clear about what the steps are. What exactly it is that needs to be done. So they can see, okay, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this. And that leads me somewhere. So when you have followers out there, your audience of followers, you want to make sure they have something to follow. Very clear steps. It also helps to repeat things. You've got followers out there, you want to know what you're talking about. And the thing about it is when you say something once, you might think it's perfectly clear. Your audience, first time they've heard it. Of course, for us as speakers, we've heard this over and over again. We know exactly what we're going to say. We say, I'll mention that, they'll get it. No, it doesn't work that way. You want people to follow you. You want the followers, you want to get that audience of followers to follow you where you're going, you need to repeat things and make them very clear. So you have the step 1, the step 2, and the step 3. So if you're talking about something like, how do you learn? First we investigate, find out the details, and then we get some ideas about how these details work in our life, and then we actually apply these things, use these things in our life, and see what happens. And based on that, we investigate, and then we find out more about the details, and then we apply things. We just repeat this process over and over again. That's the learning process. Well, the followers can follow that. Oh, there's a step 1, there's a step 2, there's a step 3. And naturally, if you were actually giving a speech about learning, you'd talk more about the learning process. You'd take each individual step, you'd blow them out, so people can see what you're talking about, can hear what you're talking about, all the things there, and make it clear. But the great thing about having an audience of followers is if you get this right, if you have all the steps in order, if you make it clear what people are supposed to do and what are the benefits of doing things, then those people will follow you. And when they follow you, they'll look for things that you have. They'll look for when you're presenting again. They'll recommend you to others. Followers are great to have. Ask any movie starlet, movie star. Followers are wonderful. They can produce a lot of money, if nothing else. To have followers, as a speaker, you have to be clear, do things step by step, so people know exactly what to follow. So for all the followers out there in the audience, make things clear and move step by step. Another type of audience is the fact checkers. Have an audience of fact checkers, they're going to want to get the facts. And they're going to check with you to make sure that you've got it. If you don't have it, you aren't quite sure, well, they're not going to be too happy. And they're going to keep pushing and pushing to find out more and more about what things you know and what things you don't know. The fact checkers aren't really trying to make your life miserable, although they can. What the fact checkers are trying to do, they're trying to find those 1 or maybe 2 points in your whole speech that are really solid, they can really use. These are people who've been there, done that, heard about everything, and every time they go to a speech, they're trying to figure out, is there something new I can pull out of this? They've heard the big, broad picture of things. They're looking in there to try to find a few new details. So they're going to check the facts. They're going to check you. Now what that means is, when you have fact checker audience, you've got to keep your cool and take it personally. Because if you take it personally that these people are sitting in there and they're actually trying to figure out if you did your homework, who are these people? What are they talking about? This is really annoying. I spent a lot of time studying to do this presentation. How dare anybody tell me that anything's going wrong with my speech? It's ridiculous and it just makes me furious. If you allow fact checkers to work you up, get you going, to tick you off, you're going to have a lot of problems, because there is going to be an audience of fact checkers out there. You got to be ready for them. Particularly if you start doing that question and answer session, where you ask the audience, do you have any questions? Well, this is the fact checker's dream. You bet I have questions. What about this and what about that? And so says that doesn't work, and I've heard that. A fact checker will drill down all of your facts to see what floats and what sinks. There's only one thing you can do. You got a fact-checking audience, know your facts. Before you go out there at your presentations, know what's going on. For instance, there's a very common quote that says something like, we have all this huge amount of percentage that we use to find out with the body and the body gestures, but only 2 or 3% of that has to do with what we say. In other words, this very famous quote goes, it's only 2 or 3% of our words that matter. The rest of it, some 97%, is all about our body. Only one problem. This quote is absolutely, positively, indubitably wrong. And it's been misquoted for the longest time. And believe me, if you are talking about presentations and you use the 97%, 3% thing about how much we talk and how much we gesture, forget it. Fact checker will be all over that. So don't just quote other people's facts. Do a little research yourself to make sure you've got the right facts. Now, why should I bother doing this, you might say? Or you might be thinking. The reason you bother doing this is because if you do your homework and you can stand up to that fact checker's look as they look through all your details, then you got somebody who is going to pick up a few things out of your talk. And they're going to let other people know there's a lot of stuff in there. Didn't really need a lot of it, but there are 1 or 2 things I think was really great. you really want to hear. So a fact checker, a happy fact checker, can be a great promotional device for your speech. A great promoter of your speeches. Just remember, think of the old Dragnet television show when Joe Friday would step out there and say, "Just the facts, man." The final type of audience is the finder. You might have a finder audience. In fact, you'll probably have a finder audience. And the thing about a finder audience is they're always looking to find something. They're going to pay attention to what you say. They're going to follow it all the way through because they think they can actually find something in it. Once they understand it, they can apply this, they can use this, they can find these ideas and understand them. So the finders are looking for something they can use because the finders have a problem. There's a problem the finders have in their life, and they're thinking that this might be the answer. So they want to see what they can find out in your talk that they can use to apply to their own problem. Now in this, it's sort of like the followers. They follow what's going on, but the followers will just follow everything. They just want it step by step by step. Finders, though, they're trying to solve a problem. Now, this is different from the fact checkers. And the fact checkers, as you know, just want to have 1 point, maybe 2 points they can pull out and learn something from. But the most important thing to remember about the finder audience is they've got a problem. They came into your speech, into your presentation with a problem in their head. And all the way through as you're speaking, they're thinking, how can I use what's being set up there to my problem? Everything in your speech is being thought of in terms of that problem that they have. So to make the finder happy, and convince them that you've got something for them, you want to make sure that in your speech you solve problems. They're solved in a way that are broadly helpful. Helpful in a lot of different situations. If everything is very specific, it'll only work if this happens and this happens and this happens, you're not going to make any finders happy. Because the more specific, the more detailed, the more you drill down that solution you're talking about, the less likely any finder out there is going to be able to apply it to their problem. And the less useful the finders are going to find your speech and your ideas. So with a finder audience, I'm going to make sure it's broad. Broadly useful. Your points. So even though you may be in your head thinking about, oh, this only applies here, and only applies here, and only applies here, forget that. Bring out the idea, talk about it, and let the finders in the audience figure out how it fits into their own problem. Let the finders in the audience figure out, oh, I could use it here. Or, that's a great idea. I've got just a problem I think I would work with. It also means when you give examples, give a lot of different types of examples. So the finder can see that this would help out in their situation. So be open to lots of different types of examples. With the finder audience, they've got a problem and they're trying to take your solution and just fit it right into that problem. That's what they're looking for. And most likely, you're going to have finders in your audience. You're going to have people who come to your speech because they've got this problem. And they're looking for a solution, or at least ideas about how to go to a solution. And those are the finders. And that's the 5 types of audiences you might have. You might have funsters, just want to have a good time. Or feelers, are concerned about how things feel. And there's the followers, just want to follow step by step by step. The fact checkers want the big picture. And finally, the finders of a problem to solve. Keep in mind these 5 types of audiences, because in your next speech, you know at least one of those audiences will be out there.